I abandoned my daughter 21 years ago, the woman said, her voice trembling in front of a silent courtroom. Because she was born different. I thought I was escaping shame, but I was really running from love. A hush fell over the room, and across the aisle, the daughter, grown, strong, and no longer afraid, met her mother's gaze for the first time. This isn't just a story about a mother who walked away. It's about the scars we carry, the voices we silence, and what happens when the truth finally comes home. Stay with us until the very end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you've ever wondered what you would say to the one who hurt you most. Now, let's begin. Thunder rolled over the sleepy town of Monterey as the rain tapped lightly against the clinic windows. Inside a modest delivery room, Vanessa Carter let out one final cry of agony before the sharp, piercing wail of a newborn filled the air. For a moment, everything stood still. The storm outside, the tired nurses, even Vanessa herself. And then silence was broken by the doctor's voice. "Congratulations," he said gently, wrapping the newborn in a pale pink blanket. "It's a girl." Vanessa's chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths as her husband, Daniel Carter, stepped forward, eyes glistening. "She's here," he whispered in disbelief. "Our daughter." The doctor passed the baby into Vanessa's arms. But the moment that should have been filled with joy and awe was instead pierced by a flicker of unease on Vanessa's face. She stared at the small figure bundled in her arms, her lips barely moved. "She's tiny," she murmured, her voice almost drowned by the rain outside. "Too small, something's not right." Daniel frowned, his elation dimming as he leaned closer to look. "She's perfect," he said quickly, though the edge in his voice betrayed his own creeping concern. "Babies are always small at birth, right?" The doctor, noticing the growing tension, stepped back in. "Your daughter shows signs of achondroplasia," he said cautiously. "It's a form of dwarfism. We'll need to run further tests to confirm, but physically she's healthy. Strong lungs, clear heartbeat, and she's breathing on her own. That's what matters most right now." Vanessa blinked. "Dwarfism?" Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled it back slowly. The doctor continued, "It means she'll be significantly shorter than average height. Her arms and legs may grow differently, and she might face some orthopedic issues. But with proper care, people with dwarfism lead full, independent lives." But Vanessa wasn't listening anymore. Her mind had already drifted elsewhere, to the future she'd imagined. The perfect family portraits, the elegant tea parties, the admiring looks from friends. None of those pictures had included this. Daniel noticed her silence and tightened his grip on the hospital blanket draped around her. "Vanessa, we're in this together. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. She's ours." Vanessa didn't answer. She simply stared down at the baby in her arms, this little girl who had shattered her perfect dream. They named her Ellie Carter, a name Daniel had chosen months earlier, short for Eleanor, meaning light. But to Vanessa, that name now felt like a cruel joke. Over the next few months, the house once filled with joyful anticipation turned into a quiet battlefield. Ellie, despite her condition, was a happy baby, giggling at shadows, reaching for lights, responding to Daniel's silly faces with delighted squeals. But Vanessa remained distant. She fed Ellie and changed her, but every touch seemed obligatory, sterile, rehearsed. One afternoon, Daniel returned from the park with Ellie bundled in a blanket. Her cheeks were rosy from the wind, and her tiny hand clutched a daisy he had picked for her. Vanessa looked up from her tablet as they entered. "You took her outside?" she asked sharply. Daniel blinked. Yes, the sun was out and she loved it. She stared at the trees for 10 minutes straight. "She's not ready for that kind of exposure," Vanessa said, standing. "What if someone saw her? You know how people are. They stare." Daniel exhaled. "Vanessa, she's not something to hide. She's a child. Our child. She's different, Daniel. And people can be cruel. I don't want our daughter to be pitied or laughed at behind our backs." Daniel stepped forward, Ellie now awake in his arms. "What hurts more, Vanessa? People looking at her differently, or her growing up thinking her own mother is ashamed of her?" Vanessa didn't answer. She simply turned away, arms crossed. That night, Daniel rocked Ellie to sleep in the nursery. As he looked down at her sleeping face, he whispered, "You don't need to be anyone else but you, Ellie, and I'll love you exactly as you are." As the months turned into a year, the distance between Vanessa and her family grew. Conversations became short, clipped, and cold. Vanessa immersed herself in fitness classes, book clubs, and charity luncheons, anything to stay out of the house. Until one night, something changed. Vanessa sat alone in the living room, the soft sound of wind rattling the windows. Her hands trembled around a cold cup of coffee as Daniel entered. "You're quiet tonight," he said cautiously, sitting beside her. Vanessa's eyes were distant. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "about everything. Our life, this house, this version of motherhood." Daniel sat up straighter. "What are you saying?" She turned toward him, her voice sharper now. "I'm saying I can't do this. I feel like I'm suffocating, Daniel. I didn't sign up for this kind of life." Daniel stared at her, stunned. "You're talking like Ellie is some kind of burden. She's a child, our daughter." "I need something different," Vanessa said, rising to her feet, her breathing growing ragged. "I need freedom, space, a life where I don't wake up every day feeling trapped." Daniel stood too. "So you're just going to leave?" Vanessa hesitated, but only for a second. "I already packed a bag. I booked a train to Chicago. I'm leaving tonight." Daniel didn't stop her. He couldn't. Her eyes were wild, her decision already made. But as she walked past him toward the door, she paused. Ellie had started crying in the nursery. Vanessa froze, her hand on the doorknob. "You should go comfort her," she said quietly, then opened the door and stepped into the rain. Vanessa Carter disappeared that night, vanished like a ghost into the city's chaos. She left no forwarding address, no goodbye note for Ellie. Daniel was devastated but determined. He held Ellie in his arms that night and promised her the one thing he knew he could deliver. "I'll never leave you, no matter what." Chicago, with its restless skyline and endless noise, was nothing like Monterey. The first thing Vanessa Carter noticed when she stepped off the train was how no one noticed her. In a city like this, she wasn't a woman who'd walked away from her infant daughter. She was just another face in the crowd, a fresh start in heels and guilt. She checked into a hotel under a different name, Vanessa Clark. She cut her long brown hair into a sharp bob the next morning, dyed it jet black, and tossed her wedding ring into Lake Michigan with trembling fingers. Each step was part of the plan, not just to escape her old life, but to erase it completely. The first few weeks felt liberating. She got a job at a boutique marketing firm, thanks to her polished demeanor and Ivy League education. She told people she was a widow. The story sounded tragic, but convenient. It spared her the need to explain why she had no family photos on her desk, or why she always changed the subject when children came up. She started dating a client, Mark Hamilton, a real estate magnate 10 years her senior, with deep pockets and a thirst for control. Vanessa welcomed it. She wasn't looking for love, she was looking for structure. And Mark offered exactly that. Within a year, they were married in a quiet, lavish ceremony in Italy. No one from her past was invited, because no one from her past existed anymore. Back in Monterey, Daniel Carter was relearning how to breathe. The first few months after Vanessa's departure were mechanical. Bottles, diapers, sleepless nights. But Daniel pushed through. He took Ellie to every pediatric checkup, every specialist, every early development class. By the time she was 2, Ellie was walking, albeit slower than most kids her age. She was tiny, yes, but fiercely determined, and Daniel saw in her every day the spark that Vanessa had failed to recognize. They moved into a smaller house near the coast, filled with sunlight and books. Daniel quit his job in finance and began teaching part-time at the local community college. It gave him more time with Ellie, more moments to catch her laughter, her stubborn streak, her curiosity. He never told her why her mother left. Instead, he told her, "Some people are meant to be stars in your sky for only a short time. But you and me, we're like the moon and the tide, always pulling toward each other." Ellie didn't understand the metaphor, but she nodded, trusting him completely. 10 years passed. Ellie Carter grew into a confident young teen, with glasses too big for her face and a sketchbook always tucked under her arm. She loved to draw. Her dreams were colorful worlds where nobody stared, nobody whispered. But sometimes, after school, she'd sit on the porch and stare at the horizon, wondering about the woman who had given birth to her. She had once asked Daniel, "Did she love me at all?" Daniel's answer had been gentle but honest. "I believe she wanted to, but sometimes fear wins." Ellie didn't cry. She simply nodded, then returned to her sketchbook. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Vanessa's life was a carefully curated fairy tale. She and Mark had built a life of art galas, charity balls, and high-stakes meetings. She became the COO of his tech company, sharp, respected, admired. In every photo, she was flawless, the perfectly poised executive wife. But in private, Vanessa suffered from chronic insomnia. Most nights, she sat in the dark beside her California king bed, scrolling through pictures of children she didn't know. On rare occasions, she'd search the name Daniel Carter or Ellie Carter on Facebook, only to quickly close the browser, heart racing. She had blocked all calls from Monterey years ago, just in case, but the weight never left her chest. In dreams, she often saw Ellie not as a baby, but as a teenager, arms crossed, eyes cold, asking, "Why did you leave me?" And she always woke up drenched in sweat, whispering, "I don't know, I was scared." By the time Ellie turned 15, she decided she wanted answers. Without telling Daniel, she saved up her allowance and birthday money to hire a low-cost private investigator online. She sent him the only name she had, Vanessa Carter. 2 weeks later, the man emailed her, "There's no current address linked to that name. Possibly changed identity." Ellie stared at the screen for hours. Changed her name? She could barely sleep that night, the realization burning inside her. She didn't just leave me, she erased me. But instead of despair, Ellie found clarity. She channeled everything into her art, applying to prestigious design programs and winning regional awards. She wasn't just drawing anymore, she was building her own world, one where she got to decide who stayed and who didn't. Around this time, Mark Hamilton fell ill, a rare neurological condition that progressed quickly. Within months, he was wheelchair-bound, and within a year, he passed away. Vanessa, now 39, was left with a sprawling empire of wealth and business connections, but she also inherited silence. In the absence of Mark's dominance, her life felt hollow. She tried filling it with new projects, hiring personal trainers, even dating again, but nothing worked. One afternoon, she sat in her glass-walled penthouse, sipping wine as the sunset painted the skyline red, and whispered aloud to no one, "Is this what I left everything for?" She didn't know it yet, but the universe was about to answer. The following week, Vanessa received an anonymous envelope at her office. No return address, just her name typed neatly on the front. Curious, she opened it while sitting at her desk, the city humming beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside was a photograph, a teenage girl with light brown hair, large glasses, and a familiar smile stood in front of a regional art competition banner. Her artwork, a bright surrealist painting of a small figure reaching up toward a massive distant sun, had a red ribbon pinned beneath it. Vanessa's hands trembled. There was no note, no explanation, but she knew. Ellie. It had to be. She stared at the image for what felt like hours, her heart in her throat. It wasn't just the resemblance, it was the look in the girl's eyes, determination, strength, loneliness. All the things Vanessa had once felt herself, before she started running. She tucked the photo into the bottom drawer of her desk, locking it. That night, she couldn't sleep. Again. The next day, she returned to work, but something had shifted. Her assistant noticed she was quieter than usual, more withdrawn. She cancelled 2 meetings. She left lunch untouched, and by that evening, she made a decision she hadn't dared to consider for over a decade. She would go back. Not to reclaim anything, not to beg for forgiveness, just to see her, even from afar. She needed to know the girl in the photograph was real. Vanessa booked a ticket to Monterey under her legal alias and arrived 2 days later, wrapped in oversized sunglasses and nerves. The town had changed little. Same winding streets, same salty air, same quiet charm she had once fled from. She didn't go to Daniel's house. Instead, she sat across the street in a rental car, engine off, windows cracked. She waited for hours, unsure of what she was hoping to see, and then just as the sun began to dip low in the sky, they appeared. Daniel, older now, with salt in his hair and a gentle hunch in his shoulders, walked side by side with a teenage girl carrying a sketchbook. Ellie. Vanessa's breath caught. They paused at the front gate, laughing at something. Ellie turned slightly, the wind catching her hair, and Vanessa saw her face fully. It was her. And it wasn't. This was no longer the baby she had left behind. This was a young woman, strong, capable, whole. Vanessa wanted to step out, to call her name, but she didn't. She sat there, frozen by fear and shame, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. After a while, they went inside. Vanessa stayed parked across the street for another 20 minutes before finally driving away. No closer to redemption than when she arrived, but now burdened with something even heavier. Knowing exactly what she had lost, Ellie Carter's fingers tapped nervously against her jeans as she waited outside the towering glass building in downtown San Francisco. The sign above the entrance read, Solstice Creative Agency, one of the most competitive and cutting-edge design firms on the West Coast. She had been shortlisted for a junior designer role after submitting her portfolio online. Her designs, vibrant, whimsical, and deeply emotional, had caught the attention of their head recruiter. She adjusted her glasses and took a deep breath. This is it, Ellie, just be yourself. The elevator ride to the 17th floor felt endless. When the doors opened, she was greeted by a sleek, ultra-modern workspace, open concept, white walls with colorful mood boards, digital renderings floating on wall-sized screens. At the reception desk, a woman in a charcoal gray blazer glanced up and said, "You're Ellie Carter, right?" "Yes, ma'am." "You'll be interviewing with our director, Ms. Sabrina Carter." Ellie froze. "Carter?" She smiled politely, but felt a strange twist in her stomach. It was probably a coincidence. Carter wasn't a rare name. Still, she couldn't help the prickling sensation on the back of her neck. Sabrina Carter's office was minimalist perfection. Clean lines, silver accents, zero clutter. The woman behind the desk was in her late 20s, with sharp cheekbones and a gaze like ice. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, and everything about her radiated control. "Ellie Carter," Sabrina said, flipping through a printed portfolio. "Any relation?" Ellie blinked. "Excuse me?" "To me," Sabrina said, barely glancing up. "Carter's my name too." "Oh," Ellie stammered, forcing a chuckle. "No relation, I think. Just a coincidence." Sabrina's lips twitched, unimpressed. Let's begin." The interview was brutal. Sabrina's questions were rapid-fire, her tone condescending, and her criticisms barely veiled as feedback. "You don't exactly have big brand experience," she remarked at one point, tapping a red pen against a mock-up Ellie had submitted. "No," Ellie replied, steadying her voice, "but I've led several campaigns for non-profits, and I think emotional impact can be more powerful than brand prestige." Sabrina raised an eyebrow. "Charming idealism. Let's see how that holds up in real deadlines." Somehow, Ellie made it through. 2 days later, she got the call. She was hired. It wasn't exactly a dream welcome. Her desk was shoved between 2 departments, and Sabrina made no effort to acknowledge her publicly. The team whispered about Sabrina's impossible standards and habit of breaking newbies in with unreasonable deadlines. But Ellie pushed through. She stayed late, worked weekends, and poured her heart into every design. Her team members warmed up to her, noticing her kindness and willingness to collaborate. Her work began speaking for itself, emotionally resonant visuals that made people feel something. One Friday evening, Ellie stayed behind to prep a pitch for a high-profile client. The office was quiet. She stood by the printer, waiting, when she heard footsteps. Sabrina appeared behind her, heels clicking like accusations. "You're here late," she said flatly. Ellie kept her voice calm. "Just finishing the Palmer project, they moved up the pitch to Monday." Sabrina glanced at the prints. "This is your concept?" "Yes." Silence stretched, then a curt nod. "It's decent." That was the closest thing to a compliment Ellie had heard from her. A week later, during a team presentation, Sabrina snapped. Ellie had proposed a campaign featuring illustrations of diverse body types, including a character with dwarfism. The goal was to promote inclusivity for a clothing brand's rebranding. As the final slide clicked into view, Sabrina stood up and walked to the front of the room. This, she said coldly, pointing at the screen, is what happens when we let sentimentality override sophistication. Ellie's heart pounded. Sabrina turned to her. This caricature, this little person, what message are we sending? That anyone can wear our brand no matter how limited? The room fell silent. Ellie stood up slowly. That's exactly the message. That fashion should fit real people, not just tall, flawless mannequins. A tense beat. Then Sabrina smirked. Well, not everyone has the luxury of being tall, I suppose. Ellie's face flushed. Was that a personal jab? That night, Ellie walked home in the foggy dark, fighting tears. She had faced teasing before, stares before. But this? This was different. This was professional humiliation by someone with power. She collapsed onto her couch and stared at the ceiling, then picked up her phone. Dad, she said when Daniel answered, can I come over tomorrow? The next morning, Ellie and Daniel sat on the porch with mugs of coffee. Daniel listened carefully as Ellie recounted everything. The comment, the jab, the slide presentation. She humiliated me in front of everyone, Ellie said, trying to sound composed. Like I was less. Daniel's jaw clenched. That's unacceptable. I'm thinking of filing a complaint. HR, legal, I don't know yet, but she's crossed a line. Daniel nodded. Do what you believe is right. But Ellie, be prepared. If she's as powerful as you say, it won't be easy. Ellie stared into her mug. I don't care. I've fought my whole life to be seen. I'm not backing down now. By Monday, Ellie had prepared a formal complaint with clear documentation of the incident, witness names and timestamps. She submitted it to Mr. Benson, the head of HR, who blinked nervously as he read it. This is serious, he said, adjusting his glasses, and frankly, overdue. Ellie's brow furrowed. Overdue? Mr. Benson hesitated, then leaned in. You didn't hear this from me, but yours isn't the first complaint about Ms. Carter. Others have raised flags, nothing formal, but, well, this might finally be the tipping point. For the first time in days, Ellie felt a flicker of hope. As she returned to her desk, she found a sealed envelope with her name on it. Inside was a folded sheet of premium stationery with a single line written in elegant, cold cursive. Watch your step. This is my world. You're just visiting. S.C. Ellie stared at the note for a long time. She didn't flinch. She folded it back neatly until one subject line made her pause. Urgent internal inquiry regarding workplace conduct. Her jaw tightened. She tossed the phone onto the couch and stood by the window, staring out at the San Francisco skyline. So clean, so sharp, so untouchable, just like the image she'd spent years crafting. But cracks were forming. And the most dangerous part? She didn't know where they were coming from. The following week, Ellie was called into a formal hearing with the company's legal team and Ms. Harper. An external compliance officer brought in to ensure transparency. Ellie recounted everything. The subtle jabs, the public insult, the threat letter. She kept her voice calm, her statements measured. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than any emotion. Ms. Harper looked up from her notes. Ellie, one more question, and answer only if you're comfortable. Do you have any personal relationship, past or present, with Ms. Carter outside the workplace? Ellie blinked. No, none. But something about the way the question was phrased stuck in her mind long after the meeting ended. That weekend, Ellie returned to Daniel's house again, needing space, familiarity, peace. They took a walk on the beach like they used to when she was little. The wind tousled her hair and the waves hissed secrets at their feet. Dad, she said suddenly, did Mum ever have another child? Daniel slowed his steps. That's a strange question, he said carefully. I don't know, just something I've been wondering, she replied, watching the seagulls circle in the distance. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then, when she left, she was gone for good. I don't know what she did after that. I stopped looking. For your sake. Ellie nodded, unsure why her heart was beating so fast, but something inside her whispered, you do know her, you've met her. The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. It was official, stamped with the seal of the California Labor Commission. Ellie Carter's complaint against Solstice Creative Agency, and more specifically against Sabrina Carter, had escalated to a formal workplace discrimination hearing. Despite her calm demeanor, Ellie's fingers trembled as she held the envelope. It felt heavier than paper, heavier than ink. It carried history, pain, and the ghost of a mother who had once abandoned her, and now, perhaps, stood right across the hall, sharing her last name. Daniel was the first person she called. "They're taking it seriously," she said. "They want me to testify in person." "I'll be there," he replied without hesitation, every step of the way. The hearing was scheduled for the following month at a downtown courthouse in San Francisco. Ellie spent the next few weeks gathering evidence, statements from co-workers, and preparing emotionally for what she knew would be one of the hardest moments of her life. At the same time, whispers grew louder in the halls of Solstice. Sabrina became more erratic, slamming doors, firing interns, snapping at project managers for the smallest errors. But she still refused to step down. She was used to winning. She didn't understand how a junior designer, someone she once dismissed as insignificant, had the power to put her on trial. Vanessa, yes, Vanessa Carter, the woman once known as Ellie's mother, heard about the case through her legal contacts. She had no idea her daughters were involved. All she knew was that her late husband's company, now run by Sabrina, was facing a discrimination scandal. She was furious. She booked a meeting with Sabrina for the next morning. The office was unusually quiet when Vanessa arrived, dressed in a fitted navy suit and heels that clicked with purpose. She stepped into Sabrina's corner office without knocking. "We need to talk," she said, shutting the door behind her. Sabrina looked up from her laptop, unbothered. "Good morning to you too." Vanessa didn't sit. "You're being sued, and the press is sniffing around. You've made a mess." "It's under control," Sabrina replied, standing. "Legal says I'm in the clear. The girl's just bitter, looking for a payout." "What girl?" Sabrina rolled her eyes. "Ellie Carter, one of our junior designers. She's different. Got this sob story energy. People feel sorry for her." Vanessa froze. "Carter?" she repeated. "Yeah, cute kid, actually. Big eyes, short stature, always sketching. She's a fighter, I'll give her that." Vanessa felt the world tilt slightly beneath her feet. The name, the description, the timing. No, it couldn't be. She turned toward the window, her voice barely a whisper. Did she ever say anything about her family? Sabrina blinked. "No, why?" Vanessa didn't answer. She just stood there, staring out at the skyline. Later that night, she pulled out the photo she'd hidden years ago. The one of the teenage girl with the red ribbon, the daisy sketch, the spark in her eyes. Her hand trembled. The day of the hearing arrived. The courthouse was packed, not with the public, but with lawyers, HR reps, and board members from Solstice who had suddenly taken a very active interest in the case. Ellie wore a simple black dress and her father's old watch, the one he'd worn when she was born. Daniel sat in the back row, his presence steady and grounding. On the other side of the aisle sat Sabrina, flanked by a wall of legal defense. She looked flawless, as always, but her jaw was tight. For the first time, she wasn't in control. The judge called the room to order. Ellie was asked to speak first. Her voice was calm, but every word landed like a stone. She detailed the meeting where Sabrina mocked her design, the public humiliation, the private threats. She spoke of her experience as a person with dwarfism navigating professional spaces, and how discrimination often came wrapped in sarcasm and harmless jokes. "I didn't want to be a symbol," Ellie said. "I just wanted to be treated like a professional." Ms. Harper, seated beside her as counsel, nodded slowly. "Ellie, can you clarify one thing? Do you believe Ms. Carter's actions were influenced by your appearance?" "Yes," Ellie replied, "and not just once. It was a pattern." Then it was Sabrina's turn. She denied everything. She called Ellie overly sensitive, difficult to manage, and emotionally reactive. Her lawyers backed her with slides of positive reviews and cherry-picked email exchanges. But the tone in the room shifted when Ms. Harper stepped forward with a surprise witness. Vanessa Carter. The room tensed as Vanessa took the stand. Ellie stared, confused. unsure why this stranger with cold elegance and perfect posture was here. Sabrina looked like she'd been slapped. Vanessa cleared her throat. "I'm not here to defend my daughter," she began. "I'm here because I once made the mistake of walking away from someone I didn't understand, someone I should have protected." Ellie blinked. "What?" "I abandoned my daughter 21 years ago," Vanessa continued, "because she was born different. I thought I was escaping shame, but really, I was running from love." Sabrina stood up. "Mother, what the hell are you doing?" The courtroom exploded in whispers. Vanessa looked directly at Ellie. "I've spent my whole life trying to forget the choice I made, but I see now the very thing I ran from has grown into someone powerful, brave, and brilliant." Tears welled in Ellie's eyes. Sabrina was pale now, lips parted in horror. "And the irony," Vanessa whispered, "is that the daughter I raised turned into someone I can barely recognize." The judge called for a short recess. Outside the courtroom, Ellie stood near a marble column, still trying to process what had just happened. Vanessa Carter, her Vanessa Carter, had stood in front of everyone and claimed to be her mother. Her voice, her eyes, even her posture, it was as if a ghost had stepped into the light. Daniel walked over, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "I don't know," Ellie whispered. "She just said she's my mother, in front of everyone. And Sabrina, she's—" Daniel nodded solemnly. "Yes, Sabrina is your half-sister." Ellie covered her mouth. For a long time, she couldn't speak. She simply stood there, trying to stitch together 21 years of silence, pain, and identity into something that made sense. Back in the courtroom, Sabrina refused to make eye contact with either of them. She remained seated, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched, as if the tension alone could hold her world together. The judge returned and called the hearing back into session. Vanessa was asked to elaborate. "I knew I was too late," she said quietly, "but I couldn't let this continue. Not when I knew both of them were walking blindly toward the same cliff." Sabrina finally snapped. "Don't act like some martyr," she spat. "You left me too, remember? You think I turned cold because of a few bad board meetings? No, I turned cold because my mother disappeared into wine glasses and silence." Vanessa's face broke. For the first time, she didn't look composed. She looked like a woman who had failed not just once, but twice. The judge cleared his throat. "This is a workplace discrimination hearing. Let's keep the focus on that." Ms. Harper stood. "Your Honor, I believe the testimony has revealed a broader context, not to excuse Sabrina Carter's actions, but to understand them and to highlight the strength and grace of the complainant." She turned to Ellie. "You have carried the burden of abandonment, disability, and discrimination, and yet you stand here with dignity. That alone speaks volumes." The room fell silent. Later that evening, long after the courtroom had emptied, Ellie found herself standing alone in a nearby park. The city lights blurred in the distance. Vanessa approached cautiously. "I didn't know if you'd want to speak to me," she said. "I don't," Ellie replied, not turning around. Silence stretched. "But I came anyway," Vanessa added, "because I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the truth." Ellie finally looked at her, not with rage, but with a depth of sadness that pierced deeper. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why did you leave me?" Vanessa swallowed. "Because I was weak. Because I let fear and shame win. I thought I was escaping judgment, but really that I was abandoning the one person who would have loved me unconditionally." Ellie blinked hard. Vanessa took a step closer. "You don't have to forgive me, but if you ever need anything, I'll be there." And for the first time, Ellie didn't walk away. The ruling came 2 weeks later. It arrived in a manila envelope, hand-delivered to Ellie Carter's apartment by a courier wearing a navy jacket and a stiff expression. She signed for it, closed the door, and stood in the silence of her kitchen. The thick envelope held like it might burn. She placed it on the counter, made tea, paced, stared at it for another 10 minutes. Then finally, with a deep breath, she opened it. The letterhead bore the seal of the California Labor Commission. The panel finds that Solstice Creative Agency failed to provide a safe and inclusive workplace environment for the complainant, Ms. Ellie Carter, and that Ms. Sabrina Carter's actions constituted repeated, targeted workplace harassment based on physical disability. Ms. Carter is entitled to a settlement sum of $250,000 and an official apology issued in writing by Solstice Creative Agency. Ms. Sabrina Carter is to be suspended without pay pending mandatory sensitivity training and a review of her professional conduct by the board. Ellie stared at the words. She read them 3 times. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel like a hero. Mostly she felt tired, but beneath that exhaustion was relief. She picked up her phone. "Dad," she said, "I won." At Solstice, the fallout was swift. The board of directors moved quickly. Sabrina's office was cleared out within days. Her name removed from press materials, her photo deleted from the leadership page. When Sabrina received the ruling, she didn't cry, she didn't shout. She simply poured herself a drink, stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of her high-rise apartment, and let the silence answer for her. She'd been the golden child, the perfect daughter, the one who never got left behind. And now she had been publicly exposed and humiliated, not just for how she treated Ellie, but for what she had become. Vanessa Carter wasn't spared either. Though she hadn't officially been tied to the case, media outlets caught wind of the family connection. Headlines popped up overnight. Prominent executive's long-lost daughter wins discrimination case against half-sister. Family secrets explode at Solstice. A mother's past comes back to haunt her. Vanessa resigned from her position at a non-profit board 2 days later. She gave no interviews, issued no statements, but the damage had already been done. Behind closed doors, she struggled to sleep, haunted by the look on Ellie's face in the courtroom. The look of someone who didn't know whether to run or reach out. Ellie didn't touch the settlement money. She placed it in a savings account and returned to work for a small design firm run by 2 women who'd left big agencies to build something ethical, slow, and human. Her new desk overlooked a tiny community garden. Her boss brought in fresh bagels every Friday, and no one, not a single soul, ever questioned her value. But still, some nights Ellie would lie awake, unable to silence the echoes of her mother's voice. I was running from love. It would have been easier to hate Vanessa, but hate required certainty, and Ellie had too many questions left unanswered. It was a Thursday when the envelope arrived. No stamp, no name on the front, just her address, written in delicate, deliberate handwriting. Inside was a letter. "Ellie, I don't know how to do this right. I don't deserve to, but I saw you, really saw you. And I need you to know something. You were never the problem. I was. I was the one too fragile to face the world. You were born brave, and I was born scared. The moment I left, I broke something in both of us. I will carry that forever. If you ever want to talk, not as mother and daughter, but as 2 women trying to heal, I'll be here. No pressure, no timeline, just hope. Always." Vanessa. Ellie sat on her bed, holding the letter, then read it again, then folded it gently and placed it inside the drawer next to her sketchbook. She didn't cry, but her hands shook for a long time. The next day, as she walked to work, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, it's Sabrina. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but would you meet me? 1 coffee, my treat. I owe you an apology." Ellie stared at the screen, then typed, "1 coffee, 1 conversation, that's all. After that, we'll see." The coffee shop Sabrina chose was neutral territory. A quiet place tucked between bookstores and a florist, far from the cold glass towers they both knew too well. Ellie arrived first. She chose a seat by the window, ordered black coffee, and waited with her arms folded tightly across her chest. She didn't know what she expected. An apology? A justification? An explosion? What she didn't expect was Sabrina to show up looking human. No designer heels, no sharp blazer, just a grey hoodie, messy bun, and nervous eyes. Sabrina approached the table slowly. "Hey," Ellie nodded. "Sit." They stared at each other for a long moment. "I don't know where to start," Sabrina admitted, voice low. "Try with, 'I'm sorry,'" Ellie said, not unkindly. Sabrina exhaled. "I'm sorry. For what I said, for how I treated you, for everything." Ellie watched her carefully. "Why now?" Sabrina's eyes dropped to the table. "Because for the first time in my life, someone called me out, and it wasn't just a lawsuit, it was you. You weren't scared of me. You stood up. And when Mum took your side in court, she didn't take my side, Ellie interrupted. She told the truth, something none of us have been doing for a long time. Sabrina nodded slowly. You're right. There was silence. Then Ellie asked, Did you know about me? No, Sabrina said quietly. Not until the hearing, I swear. When Mum admitted it, it broke something in me. I thought I was the only daughter. I thought I had her all to myself. And even then, she wasn't really there. Ellie looked away. You had her. I didn't. I had her body, Sabrina said, but never her love. That landed hard. They sat in silence for a long while. Not enemies, not friends, just two women linked by a woman neither of them truly knew. Later that week, Ellie received another envelope, this time from Solstice's legal team. Inside was the formal apology. We acknowledge that Ms. Ellie Carter was subjected to inappropriate conduct in the workplace that did not reflect our values or our commitment to inclusivity. We thank Ms. Carter for her courage in speaking out, and we commit to building a better, safer environment for all employees moving forward. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't poetic, but it was official. She stared at it for a while, then filed it away in the same drawer as Vanessa's letter. A few days later, Ellie received an unexpected email from a national non-profit that supported young creatives with disabilities. They had heard about her case and asked if she would speak at their next event. I'm not a speaker, Ellie replied, but they insisted. You are now. 1 month later, Ellie stood on a stage in front of 300 people. She wore a cobalt blue blazer and black jeans. No heels, no pretenses. She talked about growth, about pain, about how power isn't always about volume, but about clarity. About how silence can be violence, but words, when used right, can build worlds. After the talk, a girl about 11 years old approached her. She had a small frame, big eyes, and braces. She said nothing at first, just handed Ellie a drawing. It was a sketch of a tree, crooked, tiny, but standing tall despite the wind blowing around it. Ellie knelt down. Did you draw this? The girl nodded. Ellie smiled. It's beautiful. Then the girl whispered, You are too. It had been 3 months since the ruling. 3 months since Ellie Carter stood in front of a packed auditorium, receiving not just justice, but something closer to peace. But healing wasn't a straight road. It twisted, circled, and sometimes doubled back on itself. One grey Saturday morning, Ellie opened her front door to find a package waiting. No label, no postage, just a brown paper box and a white envelope taped to the top, with her name written in the same deliberate, elegant handwriting she had seen once before. Inside the box was a leather-bound journal, old but well kept. And inside the envelope, a letter. Ellie, I found this when I was cleaning out my storage unit last week. It's the journal I kept during my pregnancy with you. I almost threw it away. But then I read it, every page, and realized it was the only proof I ever loved you before fear convinced me I didn't. You never asked for this, but I hope someday, maybe not now, maybe not soon, you'll read it. Vanessa. Ellie didn't open the journal. Not that day. She placed it on her desk, next to her laptop, where it sat like a quiet invitation. Later that week, Daniel invited her over for dinner. Just the two of them, like old times. They sat at the table eating chicken parmesan and laughing at a memory from her childhood, when she'd painted the cat blue because she wanted him to match the sky. Eventually, the conversation shifted. She reached out again, Ellie said quietly. Vanessa. Daniel set his fork down. What did she say? She gave me a journal from when she was pregnant with me. Daniel's face softened. And? I haven't read it yet. I'm afraid. Daniel nodded slowly. That makes sense. Ellie looked at him. Do you think I should? He paused. I think, if you're still wondering who she was or what she felt, it might help. She didn't reply. But that night, after brushing her teeth and climbing into bed, she opened the journal. The first page was simple. Dear Ellie, I don't know if I'll ever give this to you, but if I don't, maybe it's because I failed. And if I do, I hope it's because I found the courage not to. Ellie read 20 pages that night. By the last entry, her pillow was soaked with tears. 2 weeks later, she received another message, Not from Vanessa, not from Sabrina, but from Miss Harper, the compliance officer who had helped with her case. I have something you should see. Would you be willing to meet? They met at a quiet cafe downtown. Harper placed a folder on the table. This didn't come out in court, but I felt you deserved to know. Inside were documents from Solstice's archives, mostly performance reviews, internal notes, and one surprising discovery. A hiring recommendation signed by Vanessa Carter, dated 3 months before Ellie's interview. Promising young designer, portfolio shows emotional maturity, should be considered for mentorship. Ellie looked up, stunned. She helped get me hired. Harper nodded. Looks like it. She used her old executive access quietly, behind the scenes. Ellie leaned back, heart pounding. All this time, she thought her mother had only returned after the damage. But it turned out, Vanessa had never really left the shadows. The next morning, Ellie knocked on a door she never thought she'd knock on again. Vanessa answered, surprised, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, flour dusted across her sweater. I bake when I'm anxious, she said with a small smile. I don't eat muffins, Ellie said. Vanessa blinked. But I'll sit, Ellie added. So they sat, and for the first time Ellie asked, What was it like the day you left? Vanessa swallowed. The rain had stopped. You were crying in the other room, and I told myself someone else could love you better. Someone who wasn't afraid. Ellie looked down. You were wrong, she said. But he did. He loved me better. Vanessa nodded. I know. I'm grateful for him, and ashamed of myself. They sat in silence. Then Ellie asked, Why did you help get me hired? Vanessa's eyes glistened, because even from afar, I wanted you to have the chance I didn't give you. Ellie stood. I'm not saying we're okay, she said, but this is a start. Vanessa whispered, That's all I could ever ask for. The next weekend, Ellie received a text from Sabrina. Vanessa's hosting a small gathering next Sunday. Not a big thing, just us. She asked me to invite you, no pressure. Ellie read the message twice. Her thumb hovered over the reply. She wasn't sure what she wanted, or whether she was ready to face both women again in the same room. But something in her chest whispered, You've come this far, keep going. She replied, I'll think about it. The house was modest, nothing like the high-rise Vanessa used to live in. This place had worn wooden floors, a bookshelf full of old paperbacks, and a dining table that didn't match the chairs around it. When Ellie arrived, the door was already open. Sabrina greeted her with a half-smile. You came. I almost didn't, Ellie admitted. I almost didn't invite you, Sabrina confessed, then smirked. But growth, right? Vanessa was in the kitchen, preparing tea. She glanced up, her expression soft but cautious. You're here. Ellie nodded. Let's not make it a big deal. They all sat at the table, a strange silence hanging between them like fog, but it wasn't hostile. Just new. Vanessa broke the silence first. I've been going to therapy. Ellie raised her brows. Sabrina laughed lightly. Don't worry, she hates it. I do not, Vanessa said with mock offense. I just hate when they're right. Ellie cracked a smile, and that was the beginning. Over the next hour, they talked about simple things, favorite books, worst dates, embarrassing moments. Somewhere in the middle of it all, Ellie found herself laughing. Not pretending, not polite, just laughing. At one point, Vanessa disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box. She placed it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were a few old photographs. One of Vanessa as a teenager, one of Daniel, back when he and Vanessa were young, and one, folded and faded, of Ellie as a baby, wrapped in a yellow blanket. I kept this, Vanessa said softly, even when I didn't think I deserved to. Ellie picked it up. For a long time, she just stared at it. Then she said, You do now. Ellie Carter sat alone in her apartment, sketchbook resting on her lap, but the page remained blank. Outside, San Francisco pulsed with late spring energy. Laughter from the street below, bicycles zipping past cafes, music spilling from a rooftop bar 2 blocks away. But inside, Ellie's mind was far from peaceful. A week ago, she had received an email, one that had kept her up for nights. Subject: Speaking Opportunity, Global Voices Creative Summit, 2025. Dear Ms. Carter, We were moved by your story and your recent talk on inclusion and courage in the creative field. We'd like to formally invite you to give a keynote speech at our annual summit in New York City next month. We understand this would be a large platform, over 4,000 attendees, industry leaders, global press coverage. And we would cover all travel and accommodations. We believe your voice deserves to be heard. Warmly, Global Voices team. Ellie had read the email 10 times, then closed her laptop, then opened it again. She hadn't replied. The offer sat like a weight on her shoulders, not because she didn't want to do it, but because she wasn't sure if she could. She had spent most of her life trying not to be seen, and now they wanted her on a global stage. Her thoughts spiraled. What if she froze? What if she couldn't handle the spotlight? What if all those eyes saw her not as a designer, not as a survivor, but just as a girl with a condition? Or worse, what if they saw her the way Vanessa once did? The next morning, she met Daniel at their favorite old diner. Red booths, sticky menus, waitresses who remembered your name. He sipped his coffee and listened quietly as Ellie explained the invitation. When she was done, he set his mug down. "You don't have to prove anything, Ellie." "I know," she said, "but maybe I want to." Daniel tilted his head. "Then what's holding you back?" Ellie hesitated. "What if I mess it up? What if I'm not ready?" Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "You've been ready since the day you stood up in that courtroom and made the world listen. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being you." She blinked back sudden tears. "I'm scared." "I know," he said. "Do it anyway." That night, she found herself standing in front of her mirror, practicing. She tried on outfits. She read her previous speech aloud. She timed herself. She changed her tone. She tried to imagine the room, the lights, the applause, the silence. But mostly, she imagined her younger self, the girl sitting in a classroom, feet dangling above the floor, wondering if she would ever belong. "This is for her," she thought. Then she opened her laptop and typed, "Dear Global Voices team, thank you for the honor. I would be proud to speak. Let's do this." A week before the summit, Ellie received another message from Vanessa. "Can I come watch you speak? I won't say a word. I just want to be there." Ellie stared at the message for a long time, then typed, "Okay, you can come." The venue was massive, floor-to-ceiling glass, polished floors, and banners with names of speakers from all over the world. Industry veterans, political activists, authors, artists, and at the center of the schedule, in bold letters, Keynote, The Courage to be Seen, Ellie Carter. Backstage, Ellie paced slowly, her heart thudding so loudly she thought it might echo through the walls. Then she felt a light touch on her shoulder. Sabrina, dressed in black, wearing a visitor badge, holding a travel mug. "I came too," she said. "Didn't want you to think I was ignoring your big moment." Ellie let out a short laugh. "You? Ignoring attention?" Sabrina rolled her eyes. "I've changed." Ellie smiled. "You're here. That's enough." Sabrina hesitated, then pulled something from her purse, a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this, just something I wanted to give you before you go on." Ellie took it, nodded, and slipped it into her pocket. Then the stage manager appeared. "You're up in 2. Ellie stepped out under the lights to thunderous applause, and when it quieted, she stood at the podium, took a breath, and began. "When I was born, my mother walked away from me. Not because she didn't love me, I believe now that she did, but because fear can dress up like shame, and shame can silence even the strongest hearts. For years, I thought being different meant being invisible, until one day someone saw me. And then one day I saw myself. Today I want to talk to you, not about my condition, or the courtroom, or the pain, but about the power of claiming your own story." The rest of the speech faded into a blur of emotion, applause, and lights. But when she stepped down, Vanessa stood in the corner. She was crying, and Sabrina, standing beside her, was clapping, not politely, but with genuine pride. After the keynote, Ellie stepped into the quiet of the backstage green room. She leaned against the wall, letting the silence wash over her. Her hands were still trembling, her chest buzzing with adrenaline, but there was a strange calm settling in, the kind that only came after doing something that once terrified you. A soft knock on the door. It creaked open. Vanessa stepped inside, slowly, carefully, as if she were entering holy ground. "I wasn't going to say anything," she whispered, "but then I saw you up there, and I had to." Ellie turned toward her, but said nothing. Vanessa stepped closer. "You were magnificent," Ellie's breath caught. "You spoke the words I've spent my life avoiding," Vanessa continued. "And still, you stood there. You owned them. I'm so proud of you, Ellie." Ellie blinked, the words landing somewhere she didn't expect. Not in her ears, but somewhere deeper. After a long pause, she said, "For a long time, I needed to hear that. But tonight, I needed to believe it more." Vanessa smiled through her tears. "Then I'm glad I said it." Later that evening, back at her hotel room, Ellie unfolded the note Sabrina had given her backstage. It was handwritten, sloppy, but heartfelt. "Ellie, you didn't just take the stage today, you rewrote it. I used to think strength was about control, power, perfection. But today I saw something different. I saw real strength. I saw my sister." Ellie read it twice, then placed it inside her journal alongside Vanessa's old pregnancy entry. Different handwriting, different history. Same ache, same beginning. The next morning, Ellie took a walk alone through Central Park before her flight home. She watched kids race boats across a fountain. An older couple fed birds on a bench. A street performer played violin in the distance. She sat under a tree, closed her eyes, and for the first time in years felt whole. Not because everything had been fixed, but because she was no longer carrying it all alone. And because for once, the voices behind her, Vanessa's, Sabrina's, Daniel's, weren't pulling her back. They were walking beside her. The plane touched down in San Francisco just after sunset. Ellie Carter leaned her head against the window, watching as the lights of the city flickered like stars that had forgotten their place in the sky. It had only been a few days since her keynote speech, but something inside her felt entirely rearranged. She wasn't the same girl who left this city, and she wasn't coming back to be. Waiting for her at the arrivals gate was Daniel, still wearing the jacket he'd had since she was in middle school. When he saw her, he smiled wide. "Well?" Ellie dropped her bag and hugged him tight. "She did it," she whispered. "I did it." Daniel held her tighter. "I never doubted you." As they walked toward the parking lot, Ellie said, "They've already emailed, the non-profit. They want to make the speech into a video campaign." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You going to say yes?" She paused. I'm going to say yes to a lot of things now." The next morning, Ellie opened her inbox and stared at an email she hadn't opened yet. It had arrived just before she boarded the flight home. Subject, job opportunity. Creative Director at Lighthouse Collective. "Dear Ms. Carter, we are a newly founded non-profit focused on mentoring young artists from marginalized backgrounds. We saw your keynote, read about your journey, and we believe your voice and vision are exactly what we need. Would you consider joining us, not as a guest, but as a leader, as creative director? We understand this would mean leaving your current firm, and we respect that decision. But if you're looking for a place to build something that matters, we're here, sincerely, the Lighthouse team." Ellie stared at the screen. Then she closed her eyes and whispered, "Wow." She spent the next few days in a state of quiet reflection, long walks, conversations with Daniel, drawing just for herself again. She hadn't accepted the offer. Not yet, because for the first time in her life, she realized something important. She wasn't running anymore. Not from her height, not from her history, not from the mother who left. Not even from the half-sister who had once humiliated her. She had faced them all, and now it was about what she wanted. On Saturday, Ellie visited Vanessa. The door opened before she could knock. "I saw the news," Vanessa said. "The Lighthouse thing. Are you going to take it?" Ellie shrugged. "Still deciding." Vanessa hesitated. "Can I say something?" Ellie nodded. "If you take it," Vanessa said, "do it for you. Not to prove anything, not to fix anything. Not for me, just for you." Ellie smiled, surprised. "Thanks," she said. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." They had tea. They didn't talk about the past. They talked about art, about mentorship, about healing, about how people could change, if they wanted to. At one point, Vanessa pulled something from her pocket, a tiny silver pendant shaped like a compass. "I bought this for you years ago," she said, "but I didn't have the right to give it." Ellie took it gently, eyes soft. "It's yours now," Vanessa whispered, "whatever direction you choose." That night, Ellie walked home in the cool dark. She stopped at the pier and watched the lights on the water. She held the compass in her hand and turned it over once, twice, then tucked it into her coat pocket. Then she called the number in the email. A voice answered, "Lighthouse Collective." "This is Ellie Carter," she said. "I'm calling about the creative director role." "Yes, of course," the voice brightened. "We're thrilled to hear from you. Do you have an answer?" Ellie smiled. "I do." The next few weeks moved like time had exhaled. Slower, lighter, full of clarity. Ellie began working remotely with the Lighthouse Collective while transitioning out of her current firm. She met with founders, built early concepts, mentored her first batch of young artists, all virtually, all with care. One of them, a shy 17-year-old girl named Ava from Detroit, had created a digital painting that left Ellie stunned. A portrait of a faceless girl floating in a storm, tethered to the ground by red thread. "I don't know what it means yet," Ava had said, eyes downcast on the video call. Ellie smiled gently. "That's the beauty of art. Sometimes it knows before we do." She saw herself in Ava, the girl afraid to be seen, but still hoping someone would look anyway. Sabrina called a week later. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we should do something together." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "A creative fund for young women, especially those with disabilities." "Name it after someone, not me, not you, maybe her." It took Ellie a second to realize she meant their mother. "You think she'd like that?" Ellie asked. Sabrina exhaled. "I don't know, but maybe she doesn't have to. Maybe we're allowed to rewrite things now." Ellie nodded slowly. "Let's talk." Vanessa, for her part, continued rebuilding, slowly, privately. She joined a support group, started volunteering at a shelter once a week, reconnected with Daniel for coffee once, awkwardly but kindly. The silence between them had mellowed into something resembling mutual forgiveness. One evening, Ellie and Vanessa painted side by side at a small community art class. Vanessa's canvas was messy, uncoordinated, a burst of bright, clashing colors. Ellie glanced over. "Oh, what is it?" "I have no idea, Vanessa laughed. "It's honest," Ellie said, "and brave." Vanessa smiled. "I had a good teacher." On the first official day of her new job, Ellie arrived at Lighthouse's co-working space in downtown San Francisco. The team welcomed her with flowers, notebooks, and a hand-drawn welcome banner made by the interns. Ava was there too, in person this time, shy but smiling. They sat together during lunch, sketchbooks open, sharing stories. "You're kind of famous now," Ava whispered. Ellie chuckled. "Famous is overrated. Visible. That's the gift." That night, Ellie stood in front of her mirror, holding the compass pendant in one hand and her old sketchbook in the other. She traced the edges of both, then smiled. Then she wrote a new title on the first page, "The Girl Who Walked Through Fire," and built the door herself. And just like that, Ellie Carter didn't just walk through the fire, she built the door, walked through it, and left it open for others to follow. From a girl abandoned at birth to a woman who now leads and inspires, her journey wasn't perfect, but it was real. And maybe that's what makes it powerful. So now, I want to ask you, have you ever had to forgive someone who broke you? Have you ever found strength in the very thing that once made you feel small? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters here. Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if Ellie's story moved you. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little too. Because sometimes the most broken paths lead to the most beautiful places. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.